let's jump in. We have a lot, a lot in store for this call. So we have our lightning talk. Then we're gonna jump into a group discussion around capacity building, and then we're gonna give a few tips that we've seen over the years that works really well, and then before we wrap up, we're going to do some of the product updates, some of the new releases that went out this week. We'll have some time for questions around that as well. And then after hours is something new that we're going to try. We've noticed that we kind of have to end right on the hour, and some people want to stay, or people are kind of like hanging around before I end the call. So we're going to stay for like 15 or so minutes after. So if any questions, you're stuck on something, you want to kind of chat through anything, a few of us on the team will stick around. So we'll do that after the hour, but if you have to leave, that's completely fine as well. All right. So our guest speaker today is Yakub. We're very excited to have him join. He's an ODK champion, ODK trainer. He has his own YouTube channel. He has lots of wisdom and training notes and kind of tips to share with you all. So I'm going to hand over, stop sharing my screen here, and Yakub, you can share your screen. And there we go.
Oh yeah,
It's also
thank you
nice
very
to see
much.
everyone's face.
Oh yeah, so another disclaimer, they might take the light again. So, well, I said it. So I might be going into the dark and then back into the light. That could happen again. So let's see if, all right, is my screen visible?
Yep.
Good. Right, yeah. Thank you very much. I'm really excited for this. As Ali mentioned, I've been using ODK for quite a while myself. So I think 2021 was the time I got to know about ODK, and I've taken a keen interest about it. And so ever since, apart from using ODK, I've been trying to introduce other people to ODK because it's kind of I wouldn't know if I call it underdog, but trying to get the awareness for people about using ODK because it's a really powerful tool. So I'm Yakub. To begin with, I have an engineering background. I studied computer engineering. So it has been something I've always loved to break down concepts, and I've done that quite well. I've been told. Uh, I've had a few teaching experience where I've taught computer hardware, computer appreciation, and a few things. So I've picked up a few tricks here and there, but in regards teaching, and especially with general technical, people have this fear about what to expect in tech generally, or with computers. So I've always had that. So that has always helped. I'm currently a data analyst with NatView Foundation. It's an NGO. We're also BMGF guarantees. We help in strengthening the health systems in Kaduna State, trying to see where the gaps are, data, and then the government uses that to make improvements. And then if any partner or any person wants to make improvement, they're easy to look at the data. So my role is currently around creating the system to collect those data to contribute to those outcomes. And then I'm also a teacher or an instructor with the Click on Community Data Science Fellowship Program. So the Click on Community Data Science Fellowship Program is also a BMGF supported program where it's aimed at building the capacity of young people like myself. So that was where I started as a data analyst. That was where I learned ODK. And funny enough, I think the instructor was there to train me because as soon as our cohort was done, he had to leave for another job. And so it was kind of I was ready to step into the role to become the instructor, and so I've been doing that for quite a while now, and also being the technical assistant to the project. So as I mentioned, it's the main aim of the Click on Community program was if we have all this data, then how do you go about it? So it's part of the data revolution plan of the state, where we say instead of using the old brick and mortar method of making decisions, use data. But then we need to build capacity of people that would do that. So it's a joint implementation between the Kaduna State government, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the a NADVI Foundation with the Kaduna State Bureau of Statistics. So it's housed into it's called where the click on Kaduna happens. It's called the Amina J. Mohammed SDGs Data Lab. So this is the building. You can see it by the right here. So this is where the data lab for Kaduna State is. Anything data in Kaduna State has to come through this place. If it's already collected by the state, fine. If not, then it has to come through this to ensure that it's the right quality before it's being used. So it's a comprehensive and it's a state-of-the-art place, with internet, with data centers and all those things to ensure that data has a space to be stored. And so part of the things that it does, it has a training room where we train where those fellows like myself have been trained. So that's where we do the training. So over the years, since I've learned about ODK, thanks to Yor, I think he was the one that inspired me, I think in 2021. I don't know, I don't have the image here. I looked for it or I took a keen interest in it. So, but one of the things, with most technical thing that I've noticed is there was a bit of a steep curve at the time for people to climb. I didn't find it that steep, so I thought, look, it's not a known thing as opposed to things like Python and R that had a lot of courses online. So one thing that drew my attention, particularly to ODK, was I couldn't find resources myself. There weren't any courses out there for me to learn. So it was word of mouth at the time. You need to find someone to tell you about ODK and then point you to the documentation, as opposed to you just writing Python on web and then seeing 101 courses, from a plethora of platforms. And so one of the things I've done with the training is I have a pre-training checklist. So with the fellows, it's quite easy because we have an interview stage, so we understand the technical expertise. But with people that just come in that want to do research, people in academia, one thing is understand where the level is. Are they in the sciences, the social sciences? What are the technical skills? Because if they have technical skills, there are certain things that it's much easier to just connect and then you're able to move on. So it's also to understand that. And also the experience level using those things. So if it's someone that has been in front-end development, for example, it's much easier to have him pick it up than opposed to someone who maybe hasn't just been doing something around research, most of the research work. So those are things that I did. The second thing I think, which is kind of obvious, it's hands-on approach. So hands-on approach, I think nothing comes close to hands-on approach, doing it yourself. I have this phrase, I think there was a time I learned, they usually say it when I come around, try it, let's see. So someone asks, can you reference a question outside a repeated group, and they try it, and then they do, and then there's an error, and then we look at the error. Or can we calculate the date of birth using this? That try it, and then they do. So it's the hands-on approach really gives you that. And for me, I've said that it doesn't have a straitjacket where you just have to go to those items. The questions kind of tell you where to go within the session, and that is a very, very good approach. Or use real life scenarios. So some people have experience collecting data, some don't, but usually they have this idea. So what if we want to collect a data about a pregnant mother who is this and that, and we don't want to do, and they have a scenario that is, very complex, and it's very easy to, okay, let's then go ahead. What do you want to ask? And then we break down those concepts. And there's always an epiphany moment, like, aha, so this is how to do it. So it's much easier as opposed to just doing question types appearance. So it's really great and it's really rewarding. Another one is recreating forms. So we might have a form that we've used before, or they've used a form. We just give them a form to do data collection. I was mentioning to you earlier. So one of the things we do when we have ODK trainings is we use ODK as an attendant. So we have a QR code where you scan and then you fill in the form. So you can only fill the form if you're at the venue. So, and usually what we tell them is after doing the session, we ask, can someone tell us how we could create that form? And in some cases, we recorded the form together. And so it's much easier because they've collected the data with it. And we do that. Sometimes I have a form or a QR code I send to the Slack or WhatsApp group. They scan. And then once everything begins, they're able to, once we start doing the hands-on, they're able to see how we build those forms. So that's something. And also learning from errors, which I think cannot be overemphasized. A lot of the times, I really don't like it when everyone gets the XLS form correct the first time, because what that spells is it spells a lot of work for me because they're going to run into the errors outside class and you have to do so. It's a lot of work. I'd rather have them have the errors there. So sometimes if they don't have the errors, I kind of construct the errors myself so that we go through the errors to ensure that everyone gets that. Because if you don't do the errors in the controlled environment, it's going to come back eventually. So this is a sample of the formula we created. I think we're currently working on this as we're speaking. So the data collection module for the data science fellowship program currently is ongoing. And so this is an example of a form after doing all the creation. So this is a basic example. And we have notes. Maybe you could see here, we have ideas and a text of what the entry should be. And then you understand what you need to use based on what we've done to create that. So we have a text. This is straightforward. But with date of birth, we're very specific. We want you to collect the calendar. But then at the down here, you would see that you want you to calculate the age. So that forces them to use the calculate question type. And so they would have to go around, and there are a lot of questions. How do you then know someone who is, for example, which is a very common question, how do you know if someone is born in, say, 2000, if he has turned 24 or not? So yeah, it's one of those questions that come out, and then you can work around using the month. And so it's much easier to have it this way. And so you can see by the left, this is one of the forms the fellows created. And this is something very great that we wouldn't be able to do if it weren't for this forms. So he's able to put the constraint for the age using the calendar and also do the calculate the age using the calculation question type. So these are some of the techniques. Another one is, as I said, learning from errors. I mentioned to Ellie, one problem that ODK XLS forms has is the error just look too scary. I mean, this error just says you're referencing a question within a repeat group and you didn't use index repeat. That's all it says. But then the text looks like it's an error that's going to take you, months or ages to fix. And so I love for the fellows or for anyone we're going through to have these errors while I'm there. So it's easier for us to break down those errors together and say, look, how do you then achieve this? How do we do this? And then it's able. Because, if you're doing this for the first time and you face this error, I guarantee that most of us would just close the computer for the day, or maybe just close the session. So knowing that has happened a lot of times, because someone would just come in the following day, or maybe when you meet and tell you, look, I ran into an error, and this is the error. And maybe as soon as they saw this error, because it's long and it's very difficult to debug, they just don't do anything. Another thing that has helped quite recently is our friendly AI tool, thanks to ChatGPT and Gemini. So one thing I encourage is, I would say, paste the error into ChatGPT and give it a prompt to break down the error. And so in most cases, it comes down with a 2 or 3 line error where it gives you the breakdown and it's easier. So, within the past 1.5 years, when ChatGPT has been in existence, it has been something that has been very, very useful because people are able to paste those errors and see them. And it's very, very helpful. We've used it a few times. So I don't know, this is another plea to, okay, if you can make the errors look less intimidating, would really appreciate it, because this looks quite intimidating. Another thing that I've used, and this is something I use personally, not only training, but even with clients and everything, is it's a great tool using flowcharts. So someone has a complex, the first thing I've heard people, another common thing that happens is, naturally with everything, you need time. But on the first day when someone is learning how to use question types, they're asking you, how are you able to have a group of crops where you repeat the question? And it's like, just let's take it easy, step by step. Let's understand the appearances before we do that. And so it's easier to do this. So once I have this flowchart, it's much easier to say, good. So we understand how to create our forms. And then, as you can see, I have stick notes that says exactly what the user or what the fellow or the learner wants to learn. So this flowchart says, when you collect the basic information of the model, this is a real form we've used actually. So we have a particular questionnaire that's asked to women who were about to give birth, and it's in the 9th month of the lunar calendar, Ramadan, when you fast from dusk to dawn. So to understand, because there's a study where you want to understand that effect of women that fast to the effect on the baby. So the criteria to ask this is, if the woman is pregnant, then does she fast the last Ramadan? And if she has, then there are certain things you need to do. So the entire question here, the blue section, is only relevant if the woman has fasted. And lunar calendar is only between 29 and 30 days. So we want to control the number of days to 30 and 29. There's a lunar calendar on ODK, but sometimes we take the days that you fasted. So you see the stick note here says use constraint. And then there are options that the woman sees based on the number of days she's fasted. And so you just choose choice filter there. So we do this until we show the complex item, and it's much easier to then do it this way, because the learner or the client or anyone sees where to apply those things. So it's much easier as to be given them the entire XLS form. And even if you give the XLS form, it's going to be much easier to go through. You're looking at this. So they look at the group that asks basic information and then check the relevant column to see if something has been applied. And so even with complex forms that are quite long, it's much easier to go through and to teach using this flow chart. Yeah. So some of the challenges, of course, that we've encountered over the years is managing participants with different technical abilities. So sometimes with the fellowship, it's really straightforward because we have a benchmark, there's a grading scale. So anyone that comes into the fellowship has a certain level of expertise or skills that you can work with. But if you're working with people that are outside, they could have a class where people have very great using, Excel, so it's much easier to do. Other people just use it for maybe email and video calls, and so it's difficult because there could be an error that is computer error that they can't go through. So it's a bit of a challenge. So we have to work around that. So that's something else. So you need to also understand those technical abilities because you can't do at the same pace. Sometimes I tend to get excited, especially with ODK, and just kept churning out things. And then once we're at a particular level, someone says, well, I didn't get the first answer. So it's kind of difficult. And then you have to redo it again. And of course, you've expended the energy and it doesn't feel as exciting anymore. So sometimes you need to manage that. It's something. So usually I take time to have a set of questions to understand where everyone is at. And also, as I mentioned, with patients, the day one, people are just excited about ODK. I mean, understandably so. And they want to jump into the most complex things, how to use XLS form to collect certain data that, and they have this idea and they're not there yet. So you want to understand to just mitigate and understand. So that's where the flow chart sometimes comes into play. And so when someone asks, we say, so we're going to do it here, but let's understand this first. So people are so eager. Sometimes people are researchers. They want to begin their research with ODK in 2 weeks' time, and they want to learn how to use index repeat at something like that, which it's spelled disaster. They do it sometimes. I've seen other people, which they've lost money, because they just want to get it done and get the forms out because they're excited. And so it's something. We just to maintain the pace and say, look, let's mitigate it. And another thing is virtual trainings are very tricky. I think not just with ODK, but with anything hands-on. It's quite tricky because with our setting, I think we saw earlier, it's a smart board and then everyone is sitting with a computer. So it's much easier to just have people with their computers and you just jump in once they have an error. But with virtual, you're sharing a screen. It's difficult to move between multiple screens unless you have 2 screens, and let's face it, not everyone does. So it's kind of tricky. We've tried a few models that work, but generally what that results in, it results in a slower pace of learning. And then it also affects the patient's aspect. Someone wants to learn a lot in 1 hour, which they could if it were physical, but then virtually you have to also understand those dynamics. So that's another challenge. And background knowledge required to apply some concepts. So sometimes people have already used if statements in Excel or have understood how to use certain functions within Excel or Python or programming language. So once they come to advanced form logic with those people, it's very straightforward. I think you could cover that in 2 sessions and you're done. But with others, you need to then go back and tell them what if function is, then what if function does, what concat does, what all those functions, what they do, and then build it back into the XLS form, which is quite tricky. This is doing double work. You're teaching Excel and XLS form, which is sometimes, as I say, it's beyond the scope. But yeah, just to get them understand what ODK is. Because if everything was right, you could do it in maybe 2 sessions. But then if you build that into it, it takes 4 or 5 sessions. And sometimes there might not be enough time or enough resources to cover that. So it's also a challenge. And having errors are more important than getting it right the first time. As I said, people just want to have it work. And I don't want people to get it right the first time. Because if they do, it means where they will get it in an uncontrolled environment or when they're using the real forms. And the classical one is using required on note. And you deploy your data collectors and they meet a note question that is required and there's nothing that can happen. And it sounds very simple, but then if you don't pay attention, that could spell disaster. And then you end up spending so much money and so much time and then having to call all your enumerators and then do that. And some people might be in areas that don't have good connectivity. And so that's some challenge that we're in. So this is an idea I've had. I think I've tried it recently, but I haven't skilled up to see how it works. So because it's tricky, anything because things around Excel and those things, especially with Python now we have a Google Colab. Is create the Python code on Google Colab or the R code on Google Colab or Excel or ODK or all of them on one of the Google Suites platforms, and then you share it with all the learners. And so that way they don't switch between the tabs. They look at what you're doing, and as soon as you're done, they can download a version for themselves and play around with it. And they can always come back to what you've done. So it's an idea. I've tried it twice, not on a scale that I can really see how good it is, but it's something we're trying to see if we can adopt. Because we really want to see that people pick it up, and especially now that it's not very possible to have people at the same place. You have a lot of logistics issue, the security, cost of living, and things like that. So it's going to be much easier for people to join from where they're comfortable. And finally, as you mentioned, maybe as Ali mentioned, I have a YouTube channel. So it's one of the things I've adopted for myself. Really, it started as initially it was on Google Drive, but after popular demand, I decided to move it to YouTube. So the idea is if someone comes to me, what I would do is just to mitigate it, I ask them to go through the YouTube channel. Maybe you might have noticed, but one of the things is when I get excited, I tend to speak a bit fast. So people just sometimes complain about that. But the idea is if they go through the YouTube channel, it's much easier for me to say, okay, have you watched the video about using constraint? And they say, yes, I did. And it's easier to have a conversation because they have that knowledge. So if I'm doing something with them on the Excel, Google Sheets, it's easier for them to follow along. So that's been the something I've tried. Another thing is a template. I think when Ali put when the template was posted last year, I think I quite literally jumped up on my seat because it helped a lot. I mean, it's a very rich template. I can't emphasize that enough, especially for people who for us, that teach people. It has been very incredibly helpful because people wouldn't have to you wouldn't have to then keep going through those you would have to keep explaining certain things. You could just refer them to the sheet. Okay, read the constraint sheet, and there are links to additional resources. So that's another thing. And a final thing is having a conversation. Sometimes we jump into the technical thing. Sometimes the conversation just solves the issue. So what do you want? Well, I want to have a form that does this and does that and does this. And someone just, speaks their heart out. And then you understand their requirements. Sometimes they might want something that they don't require. And it's easier to know that if you have the conversation. So you don't need this. You don't need a repeat group. You need a different form. You don't need this, you need that. Having the conversation is really something that helps. So yes, these are the techniques I've used and they've really worked well. The only one I haven't tried, I said, is the idea was of the Google Sheets to see how good that goes. But yeah, that is it. Thank you very, very much. Yeah. So this is the Q&A segment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was wonderful. You have some comments in the chat. We hear you on the scary errors from Yao. We will make that better. We'll improve that. Flowcharts are very useful from Mathieu. And then Joseph said, I think the offline validator does a better job to show the error than the XLS form online, but agrees with you that it's difficult for beginners. And you got some pluses for the great template. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts, things you want to build on? Maybe actually, do you mind stop sharing your screen so we can see everybody? Oh, Tyler has one in the chat. How do you respond when teaching in a group and someone with very little technical literacy asks you a nonsensical question?
Yeah, I think that happens a lot. I think this is well not. So usually what happens is as I said with managing the technical expectations. So this is a funny question, and I think you're all going to laugh. I had a learner who told me once that there isn't the letter R on her keyboard. She looked through the keyboard and couldn't find the letter R, which is very funny. And you don't have to look at the keyboard. You're quite certain that there is the letter R on the keyboard. So you just have to sometimes it really have to keep your cool. So it's one thing I do. So one of the model I've done is using a co-instructor. The click on, with the data science fellowship program, we have a co-instructor in each class, and so a few of the co-instructors are in the forum. One of them is Bashir. He recently joined the forum. I encouraged him to. I have Ashur. So they are supposed to just go around and do that. And so sometimes the questions come, in those cases, if it's really, as you said, it's really going to just drag us back, I just tell them, well, look, we'll look at that later, especially if it doesn't follow. So, and if it is something that I need to answer that regarding that, just give it a quick answer, because sometimes, as you said, you have to I just wait to see how it's going to look. In some cases, if you stay to answer those questions, they're going to drag you back. But yeah, it's a tricky one. But I think as ultimately, it's just knowing how to keep your cool before you then respond, because yeah, that could really get you know.
Does anyone else have any questions? I have one. Oh, yeah, I see the headset going down. Oh, you're on mute. Sad
No,
times.
you're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Yakub, so much for sharing your knowledge. Most of the training that you've talked about so far has to do with like training, essentially people who are going to be building forms. Do you have any experience also training like enumerators in the field? And can you talk a little bit about like that experience and what some of the challenges and wins are?
Yes. We have done that. I think I told earlier, we haven't had anything called train the trainers. It's a jargon, but we've had training across all, actually, especially with the enumerators. So with the enumerators, one of the things that prompted the enumerators was we've had people, as you said, we trust our enumerators. We want to ensure we trust them. So someone would say, I sent the form, but you're quite certain that they didn't, or maybe they didn't. They collected the data within a restaurant, which we've seen a handful of times, and they tell I was in the field. And so one of the things we decided to do was, look, one of the reasons we have this is because the entire process when the data comes in is a black box. So we try to take them through how the data is built. So when they're looking at the forms, they understand what is going on, and also particularly to understand that they've been watched. So yes, we've done that for them to just understand that, look, this is how the forms are built. And if the setting of when we go to train data collectors to go to the field, unless we have a very high level of executives there where they don't care about that, we tend to give them a glimpse of the form and how we built them. As I said, the template has been quite helpful. So people that have been asking, we've referred to those channels and to the template. And some people are not necessarily, the data collectors necessarily want to create forms, but want to understand how that is possible, because maybe they've been told that we would know certain things and they're kind of skeptical, so they ask how that is possible. And so yeah, we have those. Ultimately, it has made them more careful. They know that those some errors are not possible, especially if they tell us if it's not possible. So we have the audit to verify. So we've had that. We took them through basically the form. Some of them ask questions to know how it's built. Some of them have tried outside for curiosity. Yes, we have that. And also with people that want to manage. I've had people who want to manage and understand how data collectors, how certain things are collected, because they are the high level executives and want to know what system is being used. And so they would want to have a rundown of it, so we can have a crash course understanding how that goes. So naturally, it won't be as in-depth. I have a slide for how ODK Central is used, because some of them just want to download the forms and see what the form is and how things look like. So we've had that, data collectors and also people in the C-suite executive. We have all, but mostly it's the learners that want to create forms that we take more time with. Yeah, I can see
Yep.
Paul.
Yeah, no, thanks, Yakub. That's a really interesting talk, and I wish I'd heard this before I'd done some trainings. And well done that you've trained people and they'd uploaded an Excel form for the first time and not got an error, because I've never uploaded an Excel form for the first time and not got an error. So well done. One of the things I always find really challenging with these types of trainings is that because we're data scientists and we work with these tools all the time, the Excel form and the logic comes naturally to us, and so I find that sometimes a real barrier to explaining to others, for whom an Excel form is just it looks like nonsense to them. Do you have any way of getting yourself in the mindset of somebody who's like that, you know, hasn't seen this before and for whom this isn't what they work with every day? Do you have any tricks?
Okay. Oh, do you mean the Excel file itself in it, or building the entire thing from scratch?
But I'm thinking mostly about the Excel form, which is where generally people tend to have the most difficulties. But if there's other tips about the more wider architecture, then that's also helpful.
Yes, that has been quite something that comes up a lot. So one of the things I do is I have this. I don't have a slide close by, but I have a diagram where it shows you. I begin with diagrams without the text first, because I think it eases people into it, even if they don't know what Excel is. So the first thing we ask is, give me an example of questionnaire. And then once they do that, an example is what I showed earlier in terms of the questionnaire I said. So the first one is the label, which is, I think, the least tricky one. People understand label. It's just what the user sees. And so we'd start with that. Oddly enough, we don't start with type or a name column. We start with label. So it's much easier to work backwards there, and that's what I usually do. So what do you want to ask? I want to ask the date of birth of a user. All right. What do you think the date of birth is? Usually, I give them the Excel. We have the question types and the definition in a file that I share, not the template. The template usually, with the fellows that I'm currently in my cohort, I haven't introduced into the template officially, because sometimes what that does is it prompts errors in the longer run because they don't type text themselves. You get errors, as you said, select one, someone would select with 2 L's or 2 underscores. And so it builds the proficiency in writing those. So once we have that, we'd ask them, based on the question types we've given, what do you think a date would be? Someone would say a text, someone would say, and you could have a conversation a little bit, and then you arrive at date, and then we add the date. And then we actually have what the name column is, which is how the data comes in. And sometimes we have a preview of a very small data, not too complex, just show them the column names, and then we have DOB. And so we build that backwards. And then once you do that, that's where I introduce the flowchart and say, look, what do you want to do? And then it's a start. So I want to ask someone's age. Good. What do you want next? If they're above 18, they should see this. So that's a yes, above 18. If they're below 18, what should they see? Below 18. Then you have 2 separate workflows. And the idea is, regardless of the workflow, all your questions go into XLS form. And then you begin to either group them or add constraint to individual questions accordingly. And so another thing that I've come to realize is, if you really want it to be, it takes quite some time and quite a lot of patience, actually. I don't know, for some reason I'm able to do it. I've had a few enumerators that said they're not able to do it, but I don't know if it's because I'm really excited, or I don't really know. But yeah, it could be very difficult sometimes, really quite difficult, because you could cover text, date, and all this today, and tomorrow someone just writes date of birth and then writes text. And it's like, what did we just do yesterday? And you have to understand, in my case, you're not teaching, primary school students or secondary school students, elementary or high school, as you would say. These are people that are they're either in the undergraduate or well into their post degrees, but then they miss these things. And so sometimes it could get frustrating. I think it's something that I can't sugarcoat. It's quite difficult, but I do that. Another thing I do is I ask them questions to clarify it. So one thing that has happened a lot is someone asks a question that, I have a text box and I want someone to write 3 particular characters before they move to the next one. And so obviously it is doable. You could use relevant and put those 3 texts, but then why do you do that? I asked the question, and after the conversation, they had 2 options, which is what they were asking for on others. And so after the conversation, it was easy, and said, let's just select one, which says the option you want, which is, for example, Yakub and others. And if you click others, you could have what you wanted to show, and Yakub is there because you're sure of the text, unless it's a password or something you want someone to input. And so you really have to work back from the logic a lot of times. So I don't show them every column. We begin with label, work back to type, then do other columns as time goes on.
Those are great examples. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
want to add, just to kind of like build on this conversation, instead of like going back to presenter mode, I'm going to put a few questions in the chat here, because I'm really curious to know if anyone else has led trainings in their organization and how they set that up, if they're formal trainings or kind of hands-on learning that Yakub was mentioning, or maybe no training. Does anyone else have examples they could share of doing this, maybe in your organization?
So
Yes, hi.
so
Sorry,
okay, so I want to just give my experience with training. For example, where I'm working for at Ifakara, most of the times I think it is the same experience as Yakub was explaining. When I was starting up using ODK, there was no, but even when you go to YouTube, the videos to learn ODK, there were very few videos. And for now, most of the people who are building forms, keeping aside researchers who have no experience of programming, but for data officers who have idea of programming, most of them, they prefer reading documentation. And I just wanted also to ask Yakub, for those learners who want to advance their skills, what is the method that they do prefer? Or experience, what do you think most of the learners who want to advance their skills on using ODK prefers to use?
Oh, I think I got most of it. I don't know if it was my network. It was breaking for a bit there. So you were asking if what method people that want to advance their skills prefer, either the documentation, or what did you mention other than the documentation? I didn't get that.
Or YouTube videos.
I mean, I don't know. I haven't come across people who would take the text over the video. I haven't come across those people. Usually people are good with the text, they would use it, but they would prefer the video. Sometimes people just want they want to see the output of how you do it. An example is if last year, before I began the YouTube channel, I did a step-by-step video on how to host ODK Central. I think I will share a piece on LinkedIn in a few days about that. There's people that I've worked with, especially people that are M&E, as you said. Some of them might have experience working with data collection, especially with when ODK build was still being used, and with Kobo Toolbox, where you can create your forms. So they can do that. But then when it comes to ODK Central, it's the documentation. Even though there's text, people just want to see someone doing it. And so we're kind of the people that take on the charge and just do the documentation. And so I do the video, and people watch the video and they say, okay, what if I see this and see that? And sometimes I tell them, look, I've only done this a few times myself, and I only know what I've known. So if it's giving you anything other than what you're seeing, other than what I saw, I absolutely do not know. But another thing I was mentioning to Ali is some of these things, especially with ODK Central, unless you know what you're doing, it has a lot of implication regarding costs. Here, I think Joseph, you might share this experience. The inflation for dollar to naira conversion has made it very scary. I think last year the price in dollar is consistent, but last year ODK Central $12 was about 7,000 naira, but now it's about 20-something thousand naira, and the minimum wage is still at 70,000 naira. So you can imagine how tricky it is for people. So people really want to be absolutely sure before they go into it. They don't want to host ODK Central, and then it doesn't work, and then they've been charged a few dollars, and then they have to destroy, or things like that. And even though it might not sound much, because it might be a few cents, people don't want that. They want that assurance. And so what I do is this, thanks to a great thanks to ChatGPT, either I do or I recommend them to. So if it's something I know they have the skills, I ask them to just use ChatGPT to break down the steps. If not, I've had that done myself, where I have the document that breaks down the steps without the noise. So for example, if you take ODK Central, all those texts in between that give you additional details, people don't necessarily want to read it. It looks scary. They just want to run the code and know what to expect as an output. So I kind of take that noise, quote unquote, and give them only those code to run and the steps. And then once they're done, I tell them, okay, so why you did this, this is what it does. And it's easier to ease them into that later on, as opposed to, I don't know, for some reason, I'm the one who does who just sticks my head in and just try it out. And then when it works, fine. It doesn't, then we keep trying ways. But usually people really come to me for those things now, where they say, have you tried this? And I say, well, I haven't, but if you try, let me know. And they tell me clearly, I'm not. If you do it, let us know. And so, yes, people prefer videos if they're there, but if they're not, the text is better. But with ChatGPT and other AI platforms, you're able to condense it for them to read and follow along.
Great. Saad, maybe do you have a really quick question? There's a few more sections we want to get through, but maybe do you want to ask yours really, really quick?
Yeah, no question from my side. I just wanted to share the experience of training from my side. We can skip it if we are short of time. Thanks.
I'm curious. Can you give us like a little snippet so someone can follow up with you, learn more?
Yeah, sure. I'll try to keep it short. I've had over the last 13 or 14 years almost, I've had hundreds of training, if not less. So I've seen a lot of excited people getting into workshops and seminars saying that, we know ODK, we are excited, it's a world-class tool, we need to learn everything. That I believe is the statement which starts to create problem for them. My experience is that all the trainings are required to be divided into 4 sections, and you need to be very specific about the role of the audience, what they are going to do. So for once, if the audience is going to go to the field and pick up the data, then they need to have only the data enumerators training. Then if there's somebody who is going to be in a managerial position, they should only have an intro to ODK and then focus on the dashboard. Form design is absolutely different thing, and it's a specialized training. And then yesterday I completed a training in which some enthusiastic, excited guys, they came in. We want to see how to set up ODK server on Amazon, and I could feel that they were getting bored, because as soon as I jumped on to command line, they were like, how are you doing it? And I said that, bear with me. I know it's boring, but just record the session and, don't try to digest everything, because it's not something that you can learn in one session or even in a week or a month. So the training has to be, it's in the benefit of the audience to be limited to one section rather than come in with a sentiment that we are going to learn everything, starting from setting up the server to designing the forms to looking at the dashboard and doing the mobile application collection part as well. That more often that has not worked in favor of the audience. It's too much to digest for them. Thanks.
That was really great. Great tips, breaking it down, small chunks, making it digestible. Thank you, everybody, for those comments. Yakub, for your presentation. I've given myself a very difficult task of trying to squeeze everything into 12 minutes. I think a lot of the tips actually have been covered, and so I thought it made sense to kind of skip through these a little bit quicker. So we have the first tip that we have is contextual examples, and this is what we heard earlier. If you can break it down, make sure it's relevant to that particular person, their role on the project, giving real life examples. If you can simulate that workflow or kind of role play, even if it's not in situation, you can do that in other environments, just to kind of go through all of the motions with data collectors or other roles. Having dedicated training time is important, but not always possible. But if you can break it up into chunks, so it's easier to digest, just as we heard, mapping your workflow, using different tools to kind of see that workflow process. The second one is around facilitating learning. So like really thinking about workshop rather than a webinar, trying to make it interactive, making sure people are set up for success. They have all of their tools, everything downloaded, so you don't have to spend time doing that up front. And I think Yakub mentioned asking about the trainees' experience, their opinions and feedback. That could be really creative and unique ways to solve different problems. So it's helpful to hear that experience and kind of breaking things down with a balance of group time and individual time so people can reflect on their own as well. And bio breaks, don't force people to keep going through without taking a small break. Train the trainer. We kind of talked about this earlier as well. If possible, pairing newer folks with it more experienced people is a really great way to learn. And maybe that second point is build confidence by giving people the tools. So the XLS form came up, but there's lots of different tools I'm sure all of you use internally. Even if it's just your own checklist, like those are really helpful tools to share out so other people can learn from that, maybe create their own version so they can be self-sufficient as well. And then this last tip is know where to troubleshoot, who they can go to. So if it's external training, like who do you go into internally within your team, where to get resources. The community forum is obviously a great one to ask questions. Lots of them have been answered. So having a look around to see what's there, and then knowing how to search for answers, what kind of keywords to use, or our good old friend ChatGPT can help as well. So those are the tips. I'm going to jump right into some of the new exciting releases, and then we'll pause for questions afterwards. So as some of you might have already seen the new Central release. So pretty excited about this. I think Kathleen is on the call as well, so she can answer any questions you might have too. So create and update offline entities, traditional Chinese translation, submission deletes via API, media storage on S3 for greater efficiency. We also have the ability to preview web forms, which I'll chat about in a second, but you can do that from Central as well by using the W and F keys to get a little preview button. You can test out our new ODK web forms. So this is stacked release, which is quite exciting. And then coming up next, we're working a lot, obviously, with collect and coordinating these different releases, the spec, lots of moving parts. Then next we'll be working on the navigation and draft redesign. And then we've started testing a new prototype for user management. So if you're managing lots of users, you have thoughts on how to improve the current way of doing that within Central, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. For collect, offline entities, obviously, I think the blue team is winning. If I was on the blue team, if anyone tried it out, I'm not sure. That was a while ago that I checked. There's also so there was a little fun game you could play. I believe it's still open. We also have the new counter question. Thanks to everyone that tested it out. This is from Matthew. I think he already left. It's great to see how things work for you. We have the Buddhist calendar. We have a new range slider, slightly different UI to hopefully make it easier to use, and then increased entity performance. And coming up next, we have making selecting options easier on different devices, screen sizes, and how that kind of maps to the web forms experience as well. And then displaying media and summary and edit submissions on device. So that's coming up next. And for web forms, if some of you tested it out with maybe saw in the Central release notes, we're going to, I think, be posting this one today. Maybe I'll just switch over. On the ODK website now, you can have a way to kind of test out your XLS forms using the ODK web forms. So to see how it looks, you can see what question types we have in there. So you can come here, you can drag and drop your form there, see how it looks. If you're new, you can try a tutorial. We also have a few different real forms that you can have a look at. You can view them. Check them out, play around, and you'll notice that there's a little feedback on the side. We love feedback, so let us know your thoughts. There's a version number as well at the bottom. We're going to be releasing every day. So things are going to be changing. So let us know if you have any feedback. Also, if you want to see our feature progress, exactly like what question types we're working on, you might have seen this feature matrix before, and you can see what we're working on. But in terms of, sorry, I'm just going to move. Oh, just move everybody. And I'm going to maybe just show what it looks like. I'll drag and drop one. Just so you'll have any errors or warnings. You can preview your form, play around, and give feedback here as well. So that's something hopefully that will make it a little bit easier for folks to play around with. And yeah, maybe I will pause there before we get into next steps, and I will maybe stop sharing my screen. Sorry, there's a little bit of a rush towards the end, but does anyone have any questions about some of the releases, the central, we're working on with collect, or web forms? Stop sharing my screen here.
Odile has a question. I'm guessing breeding? Do you mean branding, Odile?
Or branding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was rebranding for the web forms because it was quite, a bit difficult with the Enketo. So always there were Enketo logo, so it was a bit difficult to do it.
That is in the plan, in the roadmap. So you talked about the logo. Is there anything else that you'd want to do in terms of branding, or is that the big one?
No, just it could be clean, or I'm not very interested on putting any logo, but without the logos such as was in Enketo would be a good. Clean web forms would be a good.
Okay, that's good feedback. It is in the roadmap. We want to do that to allow some customizations, yes.
Not just logo also, but colors and just have a different theme would be good.
Yeah, any other questions?
From the GitHub, I saw that not all the type of questions were ready. So if we would like to test the web forms, should we just add the questions, the types, what was already implanted? If we put something not implanted, will be an error occurred in this case, just for testing web forms. I'm very interested in web forms. It was actually I'm very happy to have it in the round. So therefore, I'm very interested. Thank you.
I can just take a quick answer. Most of the questions will fall back to text fields. So you can see we have the all question types form that's shown there. So if you open that, you'll see a lot of things just look like text fields. That's because they're falling back. And so as we add those, you'll see them actually have the experience that you expect. But for now, if you're testing it, I would say focus on the logic. We expect that almost all logic should work. You can see that reflected on the feature matrix. If there's logic in your form that's not working as expected, that's something that would be really good for us to know.
Olan, can you also address Saad's question about unique ID assignment?
So if you want something unique, there's always going to have some kind of centralized control unless you're willing to do something like a UUID that's not going to have a collision. There's no, I mean, the new possibilities are with offline entities where you can do things like you can know what the latest assigned ID was, and then you can increment from there. So that's kind of a new technique that you can use. I think somebody was asking for examples of that on the forum, so we'll share some soon. But other than that, your options are still things like you have all of your things defined previously, and you have IDs in a CSV that you attach, or you use something like a UUID that's going to be guaranteed to be unique. If you want to talk more about those techniques, we could follow up on the forum.
Great. All right, we're already at the hour, so we're officially in the after hours. If you have to jump off, we completely understand. Thank you for joining. We look forward to seeing you in November. But if anyone does want to stick around, maybe troubleshoot, maybe have some questions for the team, now's the time to ask.